Well, hello again, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's BU Alumni Career Webinar, ChatGPT and AI, preparing for today's rapidly evolving job search. My name is Jeff Murphy. I'm a member of the Alumni Career Engagement team here at the Office of BU's Alumni Relations. Today's event is offered to our 385,000 alumni around the globe, and of course, all of our current students. And we appreciate everybody who's joined us today. Some, as we talked before we got started, joining us from some very far away places away from our Boston campuses. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. We aim to do this by providing everyone with access to a series of valuable programs, tools, and communities. In addition to this webinar series, one of our most exciting resources is a free online community called BU Connects. You can see that above me. If you haven't already signed up, I hope you'll take 5 minutes after this presentation to log in and set up your profile at buconnects.com. There are already over 24,000 BU alumni and students on BU Connects. It's the best place to network with other Terriers, join regional and special interest groups, and become a mentor, find a mentor, or both. I hope you'll check it out again at buconnects.com. Before I introduce today's speaker, a few housekeeping notes. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be made available for on-demand viewing on the Alumni and Friends website found at bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions that you have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the chat box. Or also hover over your screen and select Q&A from the Zoom toolbar. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we can. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker of the day, President of Insider Career Strategies and BU College of Arts and Sciences alum, Scott Singer. Scott is founder and president of Insider Career Strategies, LLC. As a certified career coach and resume writer, Scott guides individual and corporate clients through today's increasingly complex job search and hiring process, and helps develop the resumes, LinkedIn profiles, biographies, and other tools and skills that help individuals at all stages of their career manage their professional image. Scott brought his knowledge, expertise, and talents to national and international corporations in a diverse range of industries, including Motorola, Ryder, Bacardi, Burger King, and LVMH. In addition to his bachelor's degree from Boston University, Scott holds an MBA from the University of Michigan, Dearborn, as well as certified professional career coach and certified professional resume writer credentials. Scott is the board chair of a major regional diversified social services agency and is also a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. Scott, thank you so much for being here. You've done, I think, nearly 10 of these presentations for the community, helping thousands of alumni and students around the world. I already mentioned we're expecting a giant crowd today. We've got alumni joining us from 29 countries and 33 US states. What is it, Scott, about this topic that you think has people so eager to join us today? And while you answer that, I'll go ahead and if you want to get your slides up, I'll turn it
actually, why don't we start with the poll question and I'll address that.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think that's going to illuminate this, but ChatGPT, AI, this is a lot of uncharted territory. And we're in a situation where this is new. People don't know this. They don't know how it's going to impact their lives, how it's going to impact their careers. It already is in ways that they've seen, but other ways that they haven't seen. So I think that that's the reason it's compelling and everyone wants to know. I think there's a lot of articles out there that tell the world, oh, this is just wonderful. You should learn how to use it. You can use it. And, there's some truth to that. But by the same token, this is some pretty advanced stuff in a lot of ways. So, that's where I think the interest comes from. So let's start with the first poll question. This is kind of for me to benchmark the audience here. How familiar are you with ChatGPT and similar tools as a user? So your options here are never touch them, played around a bit, use them to help with work, or power user. My friends call me Neo. If you know what that's a reference to, put that in the chat, please. All right.
That one I caught on to.
All right, very good.
And I will admit to having used it at work myself. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I'm not a great writer, but let me go ahead and share these results so everybody can see how that landed.
So we've got basically, never touched them and played around a bit, are about 60, 70% here. So, use them to help with work, and 2% are power users. So interesting, very interesting. I mean, we've got people kind of at different levels, but it's, we're all novices here in this new territory. So let's, as Jeff talked about, my background is in careers. That's what I focus on. I work with people at a variety of different stages. And, I used to be a corporate recruiter, and AI was already in there. It was starting to become part of the process many years ago. I'm sure that anybody who has gone through the absolutely painful process of applying for a job has run into it, going online and filling out the applications, and then 30 seconds after you fill it out, you get a notification that you are or are not a fit. So let's talk a little bit about this. So first of all, what is the definition? So artificial intelligence, at its base, it's a machine's ability to perform the cognitive functions that we usually associate with human minds. Does it mean it's good at it? Not necessarily. It may not be, but I think we're in a state where things are starting to approach better quality AI. So some statistics here. So first of all, 79% of you employers use AI in recruitment and hiring. Um, the place that it's most likely seen is, like I said, when you're applying to the job online. An applicant tracking system, which is the software that an employer uses to take resumes and to review the candidates. There's a lot of AI that goes into that process in terms of helping to sort through them, helping to evaluate who's going to be a good fit and who's not. But that 79%, I mean, that's even included people that may not necessarily be picking additional software or add-ons to get involved in this process. This may just be employers that also just use the ATS to hire people. So 1 in 4 employers do intend to start at this point or to ramp up their efforts on that. It does impact, though, the full employment life cycle. So, the employee life cycle refers to everything from the day that you are interviewing and trying to get the job to the day that you leave the organization. And, you're starting to see this incorporated into things like succession planning, organizations using software to determine who's going to be ready for promotion when, and who they should be looking at, who's a high performer. Learning and development, training tools, customizing the training to particular individuals. By the way, I just want to say, before we get too deep here, if you have questions, put them into the Q&A. Jeff's going to be monitoring them. If we have a collection of these, we're going to certainly try to answer these, as many as we can. As far as why AI is permeating the job search process, there are some perceptions here. And I think that it's important to delineate between the difference between what's been proven and what's perceived. We're still at the early life cycle of AI. Yes, computers have been around for many decades, but the AI aspects of this, I mean, the whole idea of using AI to make decisions and to think like a human, it's more of a perceived interest. I mean, I think, first of all, there's perceived human capital efficiencies. The idea being that if they can automate a certain task, then they can go ahead and use that to lower headcount, to reduce capital and operational cost. Now, this isn't the same thing as, like, if you think, I'm here in Detroit, you've got the manufacturing lines and you've got the robots that put on pieces of paneling or paint, the cars. It's not the same thing. That's a standard process that's going over and over again. What we're talking about is trying to use human judgment. So, as, for example, a company is going through applications, using that to try to pick out who's going to be a good candidate, as opposed to just processing them. It's perceived to also shorten the hiring process. And, that's possible. Cost. It's all about cost. Let's make no mistake here. Companies are all about returning shareholder value, and the shareholder value is a translation into how much money can they return to the shareholders at the end of the year, and cost is a big part of that. But also, it's decision making. Employers want to make better decisions, even if it's not people, but it's other aspects. A term that many of you have probably heard is business intelligence. You see applications like Power BI and other software that companies use to make decisions, and they build, they use a lot of data that goes into these and try to, give you Gantt charts that show, things and trends. And that decision making at the executive level, they want some of those insights to be able to make better decisions. Also, process optimization. when I used to be a corporate recruiter, the amount of jobs that somebody was expected to handle, whether it was 20 or 30 open positions you're expected to work on, that number has gone up. I mean, I've talked to friends who used to recruit at Amazon, and they were given 100 open jobs at any given point, because the idea is that they could automate more and more of the process. By the way, just one thing I want to mention is, there is a trade-off here in terms of the human touch. Just because the process is more efficient doesn't necessarily mean it's better. It just means that it's more efficient. And then, of course, because it's trendy, I can't tell you how many times you hear about things where, hey, Elon Musk said this, therefore we should be going for this. The one thing that comes to mind in most recent of news is, Elon Musk was behind, let's try to get everybody back into the office. It's not AI driven, but that's his thing. And, thought leaders, when they get out there, I mean, CEOs are a pretty influenced bunch. If you find them that they find a trend that they want and they want to latch onto, and they feel like it's coming from a good voice, it's going to become trendy. And as you hear more and more companies getting into AI, that's the stuff that's experiencing many of the same effects. All right, so let's talk about how employers do use AI during the job search. And by the way, Jeff, this is a survey. This isn't meant to be, go too in depth here, but I want to just kind of give some overall view here. We don't really have enough time to get into too much depth, but first of all, there's AI generated job descriptions. You're finding more and more that, they'll put in, hey, here's the job title, here's some of the duties. Can you pump out a job description for me? Also, candidate search, recruiting automation, going through and not just looking at the people who have applied to job, but maybe going out there onto the internet, seeing if there's people that might be a good fit using LinkedIn or other tools. Resume evaluation. This is something that's really advanced a lot over the years in terms of, and I'm not saying advanced is positive, it's just advanced, but the idea being that, okay, here's the job description, here's the resumes, and it's going to give everyone a score. Scott may be an 80% match against this job. Jeff may be a 90% match. But what AI is getting more involved in is it's trying to look at the language and the job duration and other factors in the resume to determine if someone's going to be a good risk or they're going to be high potential. And we're going to talk about this, but companies have gotten into actually some trouble for that too. Automated video interviews. For those of you who have ever experienced a video interview, HireVue, I am so sorry. It is a pretty rough experience where basically you're sitting at your computer, you don't have another person in the other end, but it gives you some questions, you answer them, you solve a few problems, and then the AI goes ahead and does its analysis and provides the recruiter or hiring manager with some data. So yeah, it's kind of a rough deal here. There's also questionnaires, if then scenarios, but also taking it to the next level. Assessments. This is the work that organizational psychologists used to do, and they still do. But, the idea being that, like, for example, if you're going to hire a new executive and you want to have them evaluated to see if they're a good fit for the company, normally they would stick you in front of the industrial psychologist who would do some questions, give you the Rorschach test. Does this remind you of your mother and father? And they would go ahead and come up with some insights and observations. A lot of these assessments are starting to go online. So you're seeing more and more of this where it's using AI to evaluate those. So a lot of applications. This is not exhaustive. So Jeff, we have another poll question. Why don't we go ahead and jump at that? All right, so bow to the robots. All right, so this is an opinion survey. So how much do you feel that AI has impacted your career search or management? First option, not at all. I'm a Luddite who is impervious to technology. Somewhat, it's a minor annoyance or a bit of help. 3, the Terminator has arrived at my house from 2029 is asking for John Connor. Or, I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that. And by the way, if you know all 3 references here, you get extra points.
I had to Google that last one. Scott, while we wait for answers to come in, I do want to mention, you mentioned that the automated interview tool, and I want to make sure folks know I put this in the chat, but The BU Center for Career Development actually offers a free tool to all students and alumni called Big Interview that allows you to practice that experience and then also see how you do. And so if you're interested in checking that out, just go to bu.edu/careers. I'll make sure, I'm going to follow up with everybody with an email. I'll make sure to try to include that as well. But let's go ahead, Scott, and we can take a look at these results.
Let's see them. All right, not at all. Gets 8%, somewhat. It's a minor annoyance or a bit of help. That gets the majority at 59% of the vote. The Terminator is 26%, and I'm sorry, Dave. And by the way, we got several references here, people that got the reference to the last one, which is 2001: A Space Odyssey. And just for the record, if Jeff has not seen the movie yet, so if you like it, make sure you tell him your opinion on this. It's a great movie. And by the way, there's an opening scene, involves some chimpanzees, and it talks about evolution. And my dog used to bark like crazy when he would see that scene, but that's irrelevant here. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, this is, this is becoming a big factor. So let's move on. So, by the way, you may not know this, but AI, you're already using it. So first of all, the job search engine algorithms and suggestions. You go online to Indeed, you go to LinkedIn. It's already looking at your job descriptions, your LinkedIn profile, your online profile, and it's suggesting the types of jobs that might be good for you. Also, LinkedIn content generators. This is the big thing that Microsoft, who owns LinkedIn, is really pushing these days. There's all sorts of tools that you can use to build out your profile. The big thing is the summary, where you get like 2,600 characters. It's called About, where you tell about what you do. I'm not a huge fan with the results right now. In my personal opinion, if you use it, it really comes across as just like a bunch of business jargon. And that's fine. It's going to give you a lot of keywords, but it's not really going to mean much. But it's there, and it's one of those things, and it's better than having nothing in there. Resume and cover letter builders. Microsoft Word is starting to incorporate a lot of this, and there are a lot of tools online. In interview coaching preparation, there are tools. We have a link here in the URL that, if you want to talk about the higher view, there's just as many tools out there that can train you digitally on how to do that. And Jeff, I'd love to learn more about the interview tool, the big interview that BU uses.
Yeah, sure. I'll make sure to send you some info.
And then, of course, social media. All those bizarre recommendations Facebook Marketplace gives you on things you might be interested in. They may or may not be appropriate, but that's AI at work. You're going to see that there, all the people that it suggests that you may want to get in connection with. I mean, it's embedded here. So how can you use AI to your advantage? This is really the $1 million question, right? Here it is. It's a big tool. It's out there. How do you use this? So first of all, I want to make abundantly clear, for those of you who have never used ChatGPT or the Bing AI, by the way, we're not talking about the standard window that just says Bing. We're talking about they have an AI engine that you can use. These are not as easy to use as they are portrayed in the media. There are so many articles out there that tell you, hey, so-and-so got a job using ChatGPT to build their resume. And it's an uphill climb. I mean, this is stuff that, just to be very clear, it requires training, and it requires discipline, and it requires understanding the methodology. The idea being that, I'll give you an example. Like if you go on the highway and you see a bridge, you're going, you're in Boston, you're crossing the Tobin Bridge, and as ugly as that thing is as you're crossing out to Saugus and whatnot, it still was designed by engineers, and there were processes that went into this. They had to build the caissons that went at the into the water and the ground. They had to build the structures that went up to hold up the bridge. Then there are some suspension structures. And ChatGPT and Bing don't have the level of sophistication to be able to figure out the whole steps of the process at this point. So, there is an element of this that's important. You need to learn what these tools can do, but more importantly, you need to learn what they can't do. I'm going to get into this a little bit further, but there are many applications. So I have a friend who's also actually a BU alum. He is a marketing content professional. And what he does is he writes SEO optimized, search engine optimization, optimized content for use on the internet. And what he does is, I mean, basically he's writing articles 500 to 1,000 words. And what happens is that you can't just go into ChatGPT and say, hey, write me an article about, uh, you know, about Macintosh computers. You can't do that. I mean, you'll get something. It's just not going to be very good. What has to happen is it's a very iterative process. And the way that he does it is he has to go piece by piece, he has to go item by item in the articles to try to ask the right questions and provide right based content so that it can get to an iterative place and provide some information that's useful. It does take time and technique to do this. And I think you're going to find, if you've ever used ChatGPT, for example, and I've played around with it, it really is iterative. Hey, hey, ChatGPT, tell me a little bit about how to, how would I, tell me a story about how a person fixes a faucet. And what you'll do is you'll get that article and you'll say back, hey, can you try again? And it'll have to go again and again. And maybe you need to refine the terms. But it's one of these things that, an analogy I would use is like when you're going onto Google and you're doing a Boolean search. Google doesn't know what kind of food you want to go for. If you put in, hey, recommend a restaurant for me, that's fine. You're going to get every restaurant based on SEO results. But if you start to dive deeper, hey, Google, tell me about an Italian restaurant within 5 miles of me. Okay, then you're going to get the results. Hey, Google, one of those restaurants is Papagino's, which is perfectly fine, but it's not a fine Italian restaurant. Can you please provide me fine Italian restaurants within 5 miles that are not a quick serve restaurant? And those iterations will get better and better. So there's an element of that. There's an element of going through the iterations and also to train the system. And that's part of what happens. So it really does require asking the right questions and tasks. If you're not asking a specific question, you are not going to get a specific answer. You're just basically going to get something back that the computer puts together, and it thinks, and I'm using the word thinks loosely here, but it thinks that you want to know. So there are things that you can use this to. So first of all, these are things that I have found that are really appropriate, by the way. Identify the key skills for a job. So let's say that you want to apply for a job as a data engineer. And you can first of all go in and say, hey, listen, I'm applying for jobs, but I'm also interviewing for jobs for this. You can go ahead and ask it, what are the right skills? An even better way to do this is to copy and paste a job description of a data engineer that you find somewhere, or a job that you're interested. Hey, can you tell me what the key skills are in this job description for the position of data engineer? And you'd need to go a little bit more iterative on that. Now, keep in mind, this is not a human being. They're not going to have the same life experiences you're going to have had. And there are logic pieces that you're going to know that are going to be important. So you'll need to refine that search as you go along. But if you're really trying to determine what skills are there for a job, ChatGPT and these engines can actually help you with that. Build interview talking points. What you're going to find is that people that have done this line of work, they talk about their experiences. They talk about them online. They put them into web pages. They put them into their LinkedIn profiles. You can ask it, hey, ChatGPT, I'm going into an interview for a software developer using C. Can you tell me what are some of the things I should talk about in the interview? Now, again, it's data in, data out. The better detail you can give it, the more it's going to give you some better data. If you say, hey, I'm looking for a job as a software engineer, that's fine. If you tell them I'm looking for a job and going to interview for a job as a software engineer, building enterprise resource planning software like SAP or Oracle applications, that's a much different ask than I'm going to develop software for a video game. So the more detail you can give it, the more specific it can get you in terms of information. Also, this is one of the areas that it actually does really well, I found, is creating good cover letters. You can feed it your resume and you can feed it the job description, and you can say, hey, can you provide me a cover letter for this role based on the resume that I have attached? Now, It doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect. You're still going to need to go through it. You're going to need to edit it. But in terms of getting your memory jogging, in terms of providing you some base data and some nice ways to tell the story, it can definitely be very helpful. Practice for interviews. As we talked about, there are applications, and there is a link on the prior slide that you can use to do the interview practice, and it'll give you critiques. Again, the big interview software, I'd love to learn more in terms of what the capabilities are there, but I have to imagine it's going to provide you more of those insights. So this is the part that makes everybody a little bit nervous, right? Change, change affects things. And just as much as the automobile revolution lowered the demand for horseshoe makers, and the idea that robotics automated a lot of the assembly line and cut down on a lot of manufacturing jobs, there are jobs that are going to be at risk from AI. Now, this is a list that was put together by Business Insider, but it's by no means comprehensive or the only jobs. But I think it's important to know that any job is susceptible to AI, but it's really a question of the value add, right? Here as a human being, as a thinking intellectual, as a person who's an organic being, there are pieces that you will hopefully add to your position. What's looking to happen is to remove some of those value add items, and employers put these into the AI. So, first of all, programmers and developers. I don't think it's going to necessarily or immediately remove the need for software developers. But what it's going to do is there's often a lot of repetitive tasks. Maybe, hey, can you build a query for this? Can you build a, this functionality? And it's going to use libraries and adapt it to the different applications within there. So, there is the possibility of that. Legal support. AI is one of those things that's probably going to be able to say, if you have questions about building a will for the state of Nebraska, it's probably going to be able to go in there and to find some of the data, have the parameters in there of what's allowed and what's not allowed, and to be able to build some contracts. I don't know that it's going to be the best in terms of providing legal advice, though, based on subtle scenarios. So legal support, meaning, maybe the entry-level first-year associate who's really not working on important cases yet, or it's somebody who's a paralegal or an executive assistant working in a law firm. Market researchers, boy, talk about something that's susceptible to AI. I mean, it's really about going out there and consolidating data from a variety of websites, understanding more about what's the messaging in here, what's the commonalities, what are you seeing in terms of on the web? So crawling for data there. Financial analysts. There are, as a financial analyst, you're doing financial planning, you're doing analysis. There's tasks that may not be necessarily high value. Hey, can you go ahead and calculate the net present value of something for me? Yeah, that's a little different than saying, hey, what are going to be the implications from this NPV analysis that we've received? So, the value add is going to be, what are you contributing to the process from the data that you've gotten from that? Artists, this is a real pain point. For those of you who aren't familiar and haven't heard, there is a major strike going on in Hollywood. The writers and producers are out there on the line. And the reason that they are, writers and actors, sorry, is that they're afraid that AI could take over their jobs. And you know what? There's a distinct possibility that without some controls, things could happen. You've got, people that are worried that it could write a script for them, instead of using a human being. People, there could be using, AI is already using existing art to go ahead and to make computerized versions of people. For any of you who have seen Rogue One, Star Wars Rogue One, Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher had passed away by the time that they did that. And, somehow she and the general were in that as well. So, keep in mind, I mean, this is not something that's necessarily, low risk. And also, you're seeing a lot of cartoons and a lot of AI generated art online. So people are very afraid of this. Accountants, very process focused. If you're dealing with consolidating financial statements and maybe able to go through that, there's already AI that can go through and look at financial statements and find problems with accounting, based on certain scenarios that have happened. Customer service agents, oh my God, we're already there, aren't we? Have you ever tried to go to Amazon and ask for help? You've got to go through 10 layers of trying to talk through an AI, trying to resolve your problem before you actually get to a person. So these are very, very real risks. And, the fundamental question here is, how can you, as a professional, add the value that AI can? That's really the important question here. Jeff, do we have any questions we want to address at this point?
We have a ton of fantastic questions, Scott. I think because I know you're going to address some of these, I'd say let's just save them all for the end, and we'll make sure to get as much as we can.
Perfect. All right, let's continue then. So let's talk about the positives here. Maybe you're thinking about, what can I do with AI? How can I make a living here? And by the way, this illustration here, this is about this prompt engineering. For those of you who don't know what prompt engineering means, it's basically someone who knows how to effectively steer and use ChatGPT to build things. I don't think it's any secret, I'm a little older than several people on the call here, but I remember the days when the internet was first becoming a thing, right? Back in college when I was at BU, AOL was the big platform, but the internet was starting to become a thing. And there was a huge demand for HTML web page developers. And these people were making ridiculous money. I mean, a job that these days probably pays about $20, $30 an hour to build a web page using a tool. In those days, it wasn't unusual to see people getting $100 an hour because nobody had the skills. So, prompt engineering, there are all sorts of boot camps out there that you can explore. And I've seen jobs that are posted up to like 260, 270 people that know how to use these prompts. 200, by the way, for those of you who are wondering, I'm talking about $260,000 a year to learn how to use ChatGPT. So if you want to go and make some money very quickly, that might be a career path you want to look at. All right. Then we have engineering. Prompt engineering isn't really what I would call an engineer, but an engineer this is engineering. So this is people building the AI framework from behind. So the first of all, there is the artificial intelligence engineers, the people that work on the neural networks and the designs that that do this. Like, I don't know if any of you have heard of Big Blue. That was IBM's, computer that they used. I think it beat Bobby Fischer in a couple of chess matches. And that's what those artificial engineers were doing. They were doing that. And then the machine learning, which is more focused on the processes that go behind the scenes. Now, then there's data science. This is tangentially related to AI, but not necessarily directly. These are the people that are focusing on the collection and the utilization of data. These are the people that build the data sets that go into the AI and the ML models. So people that are involved in this, it's interesting. I've worked with several people who used to be traditional engineers, folks that were an electrical or a mechanical engineer or a software engineer, and they've gone back and they've gotten a master's or a doctorate in data sciences and machine learning. And it's been very useful because a lot of the skills that they've brought in the past were able to translate. And in fact, if you've ever used a language called Python, which is heavily used in the data science area, you're going to see more and more of that in the artificial area. And it's also working the other way, by the way. Python is working its way into, the language is working its way into non-AI functions. I have a client who is an electrical engineer working on battery systems, and they're using Python to program some of the firmware. No AI involved, but it is an applicable skill, and it's becoming more and more valuable. And then, of course, as we talked about, there's robotics, the actual robotics functions, and machinery. So the other thing is a business intelligence developer. This is people working on the dashboards that are used by executives and decision makers and finance folks to be able to look through and to see what's going on in the business, to gauge what's happening, to identify trends. There's Power BI, there's a variety of different other applications, but those, the business intelligence developers are very much in demand right now. Recruiters, The process has gotten much more AI heavy. There needs to be people that understand how the AI works to be able to recruit talent and to manage the talent and to work within the AI tools to do that. And then, as we talked about earlier, the content marketers, folks that understand how to use this to be able to build content marketing pro platforms and messages. All the links are here, by the way, and they are hot links. So, if anyone wants to get these, you can certainly do this. And if you want to message me, my contact information is at the end. I'm happy to share the presentation with you. Let's talk about some final thoughts here, and then we can dive into the Q&A. So first of all, there are still people in this process. AI does not operate in a vacuum, although if you've seen the Terminator, you probably think otherwise. But AI is a tool, it is not the ends. So what happens is that AI is being used by human beings. And the example that I want to give here is that number one, when you're searching for a job and you're stymied by the AI that employers are using, for example, use LinkedIn to go out there, see if you can find a decision maker at the company that you're applying to. Maybe you got that rejection notice. So what? If you know that you've got the background and you know that you can do the job and you can do it excellently, then use LinkedIn, find the decision maker. You may be the solution to their problem. And likewise, find places, in other areas that you can add value. What are pieces in the workplace that you can add value? That's your advantage. And how can you make that case to human beings? Secondly, this is the other side of this. If you have AI skills, make sure you do highlight them on your resume and LinkedIn. Don't assume people know that you know this stuff, because they won't. You've got the scanners that are going to take a lot of this data from your resume and your LinkedIn, but also, putting this on there is going to show that you have some advanced knowledge. If you've worked in ChatGPT to build content, make sure you clearly articulate that on your resume. If you are an engineer, maybe you've used ChatGPT or used an engineering AI tool to refine your business model. Great, your technical models. Another example, a lot of people don't think about this, but graphic designers and illustrators. If you've used ChatGPT or not ChatGPT, but AI, Photoshop has AI functionality built into it to help with building illustrations, and to modify art. Put that into your resume. This could be very useful and might be the tool that gets you that additional consideration. Also, training resources, boot camps are the thing. You don't necessarily need to go back to another 2 to 4 years of school here. A boot camp is a short-term, discrete period of time, that's basically hyper-intensive, focusing on a particular skill. The term of the day is micro-credentials. The idea being that, don't get me wrong, the MBA that you've got from BU Questrom is a phenomenal thing to have, but that's your foundation. How can you continue to keep yourself fresh? And a boot camp is a great way to do that. A lot of universities and a lot of technical schools offer these. So if you want to go and, just Google AI boot camps, you will find a lot of these that have, several week courses that you can take, probably online and from home, that you'll be able to build up your skills. Now, this is where it gets a little interesting. AI does have bias. If you're going to build something that is to imitate a human being, it's going to have biases. And, one of the examples that came out was that Amazon had used an AI in their recruiting tools to try to evaluate applications a few years back. I'm not telling anything out of school here. This was in the news. And they stopped using it because it was discounting female candidates. There were biases that they couldn't do the job as well, or they wouldn't stick around. There have been several AIs that have done this, and you need to be conscientious of this. So go back to the first bullet point here, which is if you can cultivate a human connection in this process, make sure that you use that to your advantage in your career. And likewise, do not assume that AI has your best interest in heart. If you're using AI, to build something, use the human check. Make sure that you are looking through what the final result is to make sure that it's absolutely what you're looking for, because you may find that it has biases that you never even thought would appear. AI, like any other software, has versions. And, I'm using a free version that's basically based on a database that's about 2 to 3 years old. And that's fine. For my purpose, it's absolutely appropriate, which is, the purpose being farting around. So it's, I use it to kind of double check some things, and I'll use this for some research. But if you're using ChatGPT or any of these tools, it for professional purposes, I strongly recommend getting the latest version. It's going to have more current data. It's not going to be based on a world that's frozen in amber from 2020. So, lots changed over the past few years. Also, this is my red flag warning, okay? Data that's shared with AI will live on the cloud pretty much forever. So, how does AI use all that data? It uses it to learn. Everything you input into a chat GPT or another engine, it's going to absorb that. It's going to save that. It's going to put it into its model. The engineers are going to look through it and they're going to incorporate it into the model. So let me give an example. Let's say that you want some help polishing up your performance appraisal. If you plug in your performance appraisal into a chat GPT, congratulations, you have just shared it with the world. And, there may be some personal data in there, even if it's not personal. Maybe you've written something and you want it to evaluate it, and it's something you put a lot of creativity and effort into it. Well, now you've just basically given up the rights to it because it lives on in the internet. So, just keep in mind, anything you share here, it's pretty much owned by somebody else at that point. So that kind of goes through the conclusion here. Jeff, I think we have some good questions here. And if anybody has any other one, please keep them coming into the Q&A. We'll try to answer as many of them as we can.
Yeah, we have some amazing questions as always, but Scott, a fantastic job. All right, so we got several questions about resumes, cover letters, and applicant tracking systems. And I'm sure as that comes as no surprise to you, having done a full presentation for us about applicant tracking systems and how to make sure that you're not weeded out. So I'm going to combine several questions here where we talk about that. You talked about this, but I want to make sure that Joel gets his answer. Job applications are absolutely knocked out of consideration by AI before a human ever sees them. True?
In many cases, true.
Right.
I want to just give you some numbers here, Joel. It's not unusual for up to 10,000 people or more to apply to a high profile job with a high profile company. If you're applying to Joe's Crab Shack down the street, you're probably not going to have that same problem. But if you're applying to, an Ernst and Young, and I'm just pulling out a name, I'm not saying this is them. If you're applying to an Ernst and Young, or you're applying to General Dynamics, companies that have huge amounts of volume of data and applicants, there is a distinct possibility they're using AI to knock you out based on the fact that a recruiter may not have even seen it. It is impossible for a recruiter to look through all the applications. It just doesn't happen. If you've got 10,000 people applying to jobs and a recruiter's working on 40 open jobs, that's 400,000 resumes. So they're just not going to have the time to do it. It's cruel and inhumane to both the applicant and to the recruiter. That's my opinion, by the way. And just for the record, the employment process is broken, and we could have a whole conversation on that. But yes, there is a distinct chance you could be knocked out of the process. That is why your best bet is to, of course, follow their process first, apply online, and then do your due diligence. Go on LinkedIn, see if you can figure out who the hiring manager is. Best guess. Send them a note. Let them know you've applied online. Here's my background. I'd love to talk to you, and try to work around that process.
So Scott, I mentioned that presentation you did about, how do you get your resume and your cover letter around the applicant tracking system? So I'm going to make sure to send a link to that to everybody. Tim early on asked that question: how do I get my resume around the ATS? But then adds that he or she's been doing a ton of networking to bypass this problem, as you just said. Find out who you can connect with as a human before you're not even considered. Okay, I want to make sure I try to do this in an order that makes sense. Speaking of a cover letter, for example, you mentioned that these AI tools like ChatGPT are actually really valuable in terms of crafting a cover letter that matches the job requirements, etc. Have you ever would are employers running cover letters through any kind of AI detector to try to find out if somebody actually created their own content or if they've, borrowed it from the internet?
No, not really.
Okay.
Not really. I don't think we're there yet. And if you want the truth, most people don't read a cover letter, just to be honest with you. Most people go straight to the resume. But, there are situations that you want a good cover letter. But in short, no, they're not. I don't think we're there. Um, you know, there is something I do want to share though. So I'll just share a personal thing that I've run into in AI and the internet. First of all, I know that you have professors over there that run papers through software to see if it's been plagiarized. But I also have I'm a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, as Jeff had said, and one of the things that we can do is write articles. And I've submitted and published a few articles with them. What happens is that they run it through an AI to see if there's something similar on the internet that's already been written by me or someone else. And yeah, I mean, I've had things come back and say, sorry, you've already published something similar to this, not even the same, but the AI told them it was common enough that it's ruled me out of the process. So, I'm not going to say never, things like that could happen, but I think the cover letter's the least of your issues.
It's fascinating. Angela's just put in the chat, folks, a series of prompts that you could copy from the chat and drop into an AI tool like ChatGPT. So I encourage people to take a look at that if you want to start playing and if you haven't before. All right.
Angela, it's real. I'm just going to address this. You know what? I mean, this is actually right in line with, with what I'm talking about. This is actually a little more sophisticated than anything I've done, but the idea is the same. It's very iterative. You've broken it down. There are pieces of this. You got to go piece by piece. Look, I strongly recommend. I mean, honestly, I don't think ChatGPT is a great tool for building a resume. Just honestly, I think the best thing that you can do is try to understand more about what other people do for their resumes, understand more about how they present it. Talk to if you're in school, talk to the career centers. There's a lot of great books out there, but I don't think it's there yet. I don't think it's there yet. And the other part of this is that I work with clients on their resumes, and everybody's unique. Yes, there's things in common. People do have common skills in a lot of ways, but everybody has a unique value proposition. You got to find a way to bring that
out. Angela, with your permission, I'd love to share this with everybody in my follow-up email. Let me know in the chat if you're okay with that. So, Scott, in your travels, and again, I know that you are not an AI engineer, but you are a very intelligent person who's, up on trends. Do you know, would you take a guess at of employers that are actively using AI as part of the job process? And this comes from a question by Tracy. Do you know ones that are using it really well in a way that adds value in a job search process, and those that maybe don't? I feel like that's actually really kind of a difficult question now that I've read it out loud, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I haven't. I can't really benchmark that. I
Yeah.
just, I can't. The one thing I'll say is, the FANG companies, the Facebook, the Googles, the Microsofts. I mean, these companies are always trying to experiment with this stuff and trying to use it as a competitive advantage. There's a lot of literature out there, floating around the web on that. I'm not, just to be clear, I mean, I do help some companies with outplacement, but I don't really consult with them directly in this area. So I can't really advise on that. And it's also been just to be, in the case of disclosure, I mean, it's been 8 years since I've worked inside of a corporate setting on a regular basis. So from that standpoint, but, I think it's, what comes across, first of all, any company that uses an applicant tracking system is using it and they don't even know it. It's part of the software. It's already there. That's part of it. They're paying for it. It's integrated, and almost no companies build their own ATSs. They'll customize, but they're not gonna usually make one themselves. I think you're starting to see more and more companies deal with off-the-shelf AI. And here's the thing. It's and what I mean by AI, you look at companies like Cornerstone, you look at companies like ADP, Workplay, Workday, thank you. All of these organizations that have PeopleSoft, these software solutions that are being sold to companies. And each one of these human resource software solutions comes with different modules. There's recruitment, there's training and development, there's leadership development, there's talent management. Talent management, by the way, in case you're wondering, it's like the performance evaluation cycle every year. And you're starting to see this really incorporated into this. I think there are very few organizations like the ones that you hear about, like the Amazons, that are actively going out there and putting it on their own, into their processes, their own. I think the majority of them are companies that are buying it off the shelf and having some solutions tailored. But there's also an element of caveat emptor, right? Buyer beware. A lot of them don't know what they're getting themselves into. So sometimes they don't even maximize the functionality on that. I hope that answers the question sufficiently.
Um, Tim added in the chat something that I think is really clever. Tim uses AI and ChatGPT to research competitors to help him prepare for an interview. So if you're interviewing at a company, give me a list of so-and-so company's competitors and their strengths and weaknesses to help him, address that in an interview. I think that's really clever, Tim. Thanks for sharing that. Scott, you talked about this, but Violet wants to drill down a little bit. Should non-STEM folks have expertise or even certifications in AI? Violet's job, prospects that she sees in the future are based on problem-solving abilities, consulting, law, and Violet is having a hard time seeing where AI would come into the picture and sort of cause a disruption to her work. So are you thinking that eventually, everybody's going to need to have some skills in this area?
Violet, I'd love to learn more about what you do for a living. But I mean, I think you have here consulting and law, and I'm going to assume that that's you. I'm going to go with the assumption here for the sake of argument. It's the ChatGPT and the AI are not the end; they're the tools. They are the tools, and how good you become at using these tools are going to affect how good you are at your job in some ways, based on shifting expectations and shifting job requirements. So just to give you, all right, so I'll tell a personal story here. When I started out of grad school, I joined an agency as a recruiter, a staffing firm as a recruiter. In those days, and yes, this is me being old, all the resumes that I got, 99% of them were on paper. People would go ahead, print up a resume and a cover letter, they stick it in an envelope, mail it to me, I would get it and open it. And most of my skills in those days comprised of being able to prioritize my workflow quickly, going through, seeing if I could identify good skills in the resumes, and then shifting the focus heavily towards the screening interviews and getting into the conversations to see if somebody was a good fit, and then managing the process. When I joined Motorola, I joined just as applicant tracking systems were becoming normal in the industry. My skills had to change substantially. Yes, I was still going through and I was still evaluating resumes, but what happened was, here was ATSs, and I had to go through and had to learn how to do Boolean searches using the ATSs to go and sort through, increasing volumes of resumes. Also, welcome to the age of LinkedIn. LinkedIn popped onto the scene for me, I think, in around 2004 or 5. And then I had to learn and go on there and how to use that tool to go out there and to find people that weren't active job seekers. So, this is one of those cases that I think for the core of your job, you need to really look at realistically what parts of my job could change. And, the other part of this is, we're also in the age of cross-training and changing job descriptions and lateral movement. I've worked with people, I would say that of all the people I've worked with, I would say probably about 80% of them are not in the original career they started in. And a lot of those people moved internally. So an example that I would give you is I've worked with a lot of finance and accounting folks who found they were really good with ERP software and became ERP implementation and management folks. So, that's a situation where they were able to go in that, and actually they increased their earning potential really fast because of the fact that, they were able to shift into more of a technologist role that had a higher pay scale. So you've got to really take a rational look at what's your field and see where could be the benefits. But I think the other part of this is on you. Where can you imagine? Where can you see that this could be helpful in your career? Are there opportunities to use this that might actually make your life and your career and your skills more valuable?
Sorry, Scott, I was just jotting down a note here for a topic that at some other time I'll ask you to cover. Last question. Let me see what just came in here. Violet says thank you. You talked about data privacy, everything living on in the cloud forever and ever. But specifically, do you know, Scott? And again, I know that you're not necessarily an expert about ChatGPT or any of these tools. Obviously, you know quite a bit. Even by signing up, by having to create a profile on one of these websites that you might use, does your profile information that you don't submit into the a prompt, is your name going to be tied to this information no matter what? Any idea if that's the case?
I have an inclination, but I don't have
Yeah.
a concrete answer.
Right.
I mean,
Maybe
my
not
guess
publicly,
is
but at least on the back end
no.
for this company
I mean,
that's
my guess,
harvesting all that data.
I think probably not. But what I think happens is, if you've ever played with these tools, I mean, you've got to understand how it works, right? You ask a question, it gives you an answer. And then what you're doing is you're asking it to sharpen the answer. And the more that you do that, the more it learns. So it's going to take the data that comes from those chats and save that because it becomes part of its logic set. But I don't think that it's the same thing as like a cookie when you go on to Rider Systems website that's going to capture your data. I don't think it's the same way. Doesn't mean it's not. Doesn't mean it's not. I mean, if you use Bing Chat, it's Microsoft. They're still a gigantic company with a lot of marketing oomph. So I mean, there's always a possibility there.
Right.
I
Well,
think the
Scott,
worst thing, I think the more likely scenario is Microsoft sees what you ask questions about. You mentioned, some questions about Xbox, and next thing you know, it starts sending you ads about the new Xbox game.
yeah, yeah. Scott, this was fantastic. You mentioned that if people, you had so many good resources listed in your slide deck, and you'd mentioned if people wanted a copy, they could reach out to you. Do you want to go ahead and there you go. We'll get your contact info up there. I will make sure to share this with everybody in a follow-up email as well. But what other we talked when I introduced you, talked about some of the things that you do for Insider Career Strategies, the business that you founded. What are, if people wanted to chat with you, these are obviously the best way to reach out.
Yeah. Yeah. Please feel free to contact me. I provide resume writing, LinkedIn profile development services, job search strategy coaching. I'm not a career coach in the sense of, what do you want to be when you grow up? But I'm more of a job search strategy tactician and strategist. I can help you with that. Coaching in terms of interviews and salary negotiations. I also provide outplacement services to small, mid-sized companies. So, helping with their employees with the soft landing by providing them the career tools that they need.
Claire, it sounds like maybe somehow I missed your question. If you want to do me a favor and put that back in the chat, we'll definitely stick around to make sure you get an answer. But while I wait on that, Scott, I just want to thank you again. You've done so much for the BU community. You've done so much for me, and your insight on all of these topics is always just so top notch. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And, I'm thrilled to do this, and I am thrilled to be part of the Terrier community here. And, thank you so much for having me. And, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. I also want to thank everybody for joining us. I'm so glad we had a great audience today and some amazing questions. I want to say a special thanks to those of you that have supported Boston University and our students with your dollars. All those donations really, really matter. So thank you very much. Much like Scott, I know you've been a supporter for a long time. To that end, I want to make sure that everybody knows next week brings us Alumni Weekend 2023. I'm really excited for some of the amazing events. We're bringing thousands of alumni back to campus to reconnect with the university and with each other. So I hope that we will see you there. There is still time to sign up for many of the events that are going to be taking place between Thursday of next week and Sunday. And so you can read all about it at bu.edu/alumni weekend. And
Claire has her question. Yeah.
I don't see
So
it. Oh, there we
yeah,
go.
it's there. It's under Q&A.
Okay.
So as soon,
Yeah, go ahead.
As soon as I'm just going to read your question verbatim here, Claire. As soon as an open position is posted, you see 1,000 applicants appear within 2 minutes of posting. Is this because of AI? Is there a way to circumvent this with AI? All good. I can. You don't need to research this yourself. So first of all, it's not AI. I mean, it's basically people just going ahead and using the internet to the job search engines and the ATSs to apply for the jobs. And by the way, that 1,000 applicants that you see is only 1,000 applicants from that channel. So if somebody has applied through LinkedIn and it says 1,000 people, there may be 3,000 that applied from the corporate website and another 1,000 that applied from Indeed and other sources. Another 50 that applied through their referrals, their cousin Mo that works in the company. So it's not AI. It's just the normal pain in the butt that is the recruitment process.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Claire, sorry I missed that. We had a ton of questions that came in. I'm glad that you stuck around to get that answer. Scott, nothing else to say, but thank you. I really appreciate it. You did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming today.
And I hope everybody has a great day or a great evening wherever in the world you might be. Take care. We'll see you next time.
All right.